I'm Teresa.
And I'm Callista, and this is Terrifyingly Typical True Crime.
We're continuing with our theme of religious leaders who kill family members. We are on our penultimate episode, and this one's a little different. Don't get me wrong, we still have a husband hiding behind his faith and an innocent wife who has no idea of the depravity of the man she married and the lengths that he will go to end her life. Around 7 p.m. on November 13th, 2016, 44-year-old Stephen Allwine and his 9-year-old son, Joseph, returned to their rural home in Cottage Grove, Minnesota. Joseph ran into the house to tell his mom, Amy, about his day with his grandparents. Joseph called for his mom, but didn't get an answer. He headed towards her bedroom and was met with the horrific sight of his 43-year-old mother laying lifeless on the floor of her bedroom. Stephen entered the house a few minutes later to a chilling question by his son. Why is Mom on the floor? Stephen immediately noticed blood pooled around Amy and a gun on the floor beside her. Stephen and Joseph left the room and Stephen dialed 911. Stephen calmly, and I do mean calmly, told the operator that he and his son just arrived home and he thought that his wife shot herself. Heartbreakingly, you could hear Joseph questioning his dad, saying, "Shot herself with a gun?" Stephen, void of emotion, blandly attempted to answer the operator's questions.
Stephen told the operator that he just returned from dinner with his son. When she asked if his wife was breathing, he said he didn't know because he hadn't checked on her. He told his son to stay in the main room, and at the dispatcher's request, he entered the master bedroom and then quickly exited, relaying that she wasn't breathing and he couldn't tell where she had been shot. Joseph had figured out his mom was dead, and crying, he asked, "Why did she shoot herself?" Stephen said, "I don't know." And then, out of the mouths of babes, Joseph asked his dad if he was going to remarry. Stephen chuckled like an evil clown and said, with his wife's bloody body nearby, "I don't know, bud." The dispatcher, apparently being the only concerned adult in the situation, asked Stephen if he and Joseph could wait outside for the officers to arrive. Sergeant Randy McAllister with the Cottage Grove Police Department was one of the first officers to arrive at the Allwine home. He was immediately suspicious at the scene. It didn't look like a suicide. Amy's arms were at an unnatural 45-degree angle. There were blood droplets around the room, which Sergeant McAllister referred to as satellite blood evidence, blood that is located outside of the blood pool where Amy was located. He said this generally happens when something or someone is above the blood spots, such as a weapon dripping blood or a person who has the victim's blood on them or has been injured in carrying out the crime. The gun placement was also odd. It looked like the gun had been placed next to the body, not like it had fallen from someone's hand. It was also found on Amy's left side. Amy's parents, who were outside the home, confirmed that Amy was right-handed. Additionally, not a single drop of blood was found on the gun, and there were no gunpowder burns on Amy's hand or head, which is normally seen when a gun is used in a suicide. This indicated to Sergeant McAllister that the gun was not fired at close range.
When Stephen was asked to go over his and Amy's day, he said that earlier in the afternoon, Amy had put some pumpkin in the roasting oven because she was going to make some pies, which doesn't make a lot of sense if she was planning her suicide. However, after lunch, she started feeling ill and went to their bedroom to lie down. Stephen called his father-in-law and asked him if he could pick up Joseph because Amy was feeling sick and he wanted to take her to urgent care. Amy's dad picked up his grandson and headed to his home in nearby St. Paul. Stephen said he asked Amy if she was ready to go to the urgent care, and she said that she didn't want to go and she just wanted to rest. Stephen went downstairs to his basement office and worked for a little bit. He went back to their bedroom and saw Amy kneeling by their bed. He thought she was praying, so he didn't say anything, and he left around 5:30 to pick up his son and take him to dinner. They arrived home about 90 minutes later and found Amy dead. Scratch that. Stephen allowed his son to run ahead of him, and his son was the one who first noticed Amy's body.
Wow. Father of the fucking year.
It's so shit. The medical examiner ruled Amy's death undetermined. This ruling led to search warrants and a closer look at the home of the Allwines. Investigators found suspicious evidence. There was some dirt and dog hair on the wood floors, and if you have ever had a dog, you know that keeping those floors clean is a losing battle. However, the area in front of the master bedroom had obviously been wiped clean. Criminal Division Chief of Washington County, Fred Fink, said people see luminol tests on crime shows and wonder if it works. He said it definitely does. Once various areas were sprayed in the master bedroom, hallway, bathroom, and laundry room, and the lights turned off, the scene just luminesced, or the term we usually hear, the blood evidence lit up like a Christmas tree.
Luminesced is better, though.
It is.
There was evidence that a huge pool of blood outside of the master bedroom had been cleaned up. This led investigators to believe that Amy had been shot in the hallway and dragged into her bedroom. There were also bloody footprints that had been wiped up. They led from the bedroom to the bathroom, down the hall, and to the laundry room. The footprints were made with someone wearing socks, not shoes.
I don't know about you, but I have never heard of an intruder, if that's what we think has happened now, removing their shoes before committing murder. But I'm sure it's possible, right?
I mean, I've heard some weird home invasions, but I can't remember someone specifically taking off their shoes. But maybe that would give investigators less to work with than shoe prints. The main questions on everyone's minds were who would want to murder Amy Allwine and why. Let's rewind and find out who Stephen and Amy Allwine were. Stephen and Amy met at the now defunct Ambassador University, run by the Worldwide Church of God. Amy joined Stephen's social circle and they enjoyed hanging out and became dance partners. Dancing, which referred to church approved dances, obviously no grinding allowed, and intimacy that did not violate the tenets of their religion. Since they both belonged to the Worldwide Church of God, they had a lot in common. The uber conservative church did not allow members to celebrate pagan holidays like Christmas or Easter, and even birthday celebrations were a no go. And I always feel bad for the kids in a situation like that because unless they're completely isolated, they're going to wonder why their friends get to celebrate, but they don't.
Of course they are.
Eventually, the United Church of God split off from the Worldwide Church of God. The new church allowed the internet to be used as part of their worship. The church and the internet were two things that would lead to the end of Amy's life. But in 1995, everything seemed rosy for the young couple. After graduation, they married in 1998 and moved to Minnesota to be closer to Amy's parents. They moved to Cottage Grove, and Amy started her own dog training business, Active Dog Sports Training, which was located in a building on their sprawling property. Amy built a successful business. Stephen, meanwhile, found success working as an IT consultant for several businesses, mostly from home, and the couple adopted their son Joseph in 2007.
Unlike some in law relationships, Stephen and Amy's parents got along well. When Amy traveled for her business, her parents would step in and help with Joseph. During their downtime, the Allwines would record videos of acceptable dance moves to their website for other members of their church.
I know it's different, but the whole regulated dancing thing is giving me major Footloose vibes.
Me too. And now I can only picture Kevin Bacon.
Let's hope that's what we'll picture for the rest of the episode.
The Allwines attended the United Church of God, where Stephen was first a deacon and then a church elder. As a church elder, he was invited to preach and give sermons and often traveled to spread the word of God. Elders serve as the spiritual leaders of the local congregation, guiding the church in faith and doctrine. Just a little PSA, be careful of who you choose to guide you.
In any domain.
Hear, hear. Amy was well liked by people in her church and community. From the outside looking in, it seemed like the Allwines had the perfect marriage. But as we know all too well, appearances can be deceiving.
And no one has a perfect relationship.
So true. 2 days after Amy's death, Stephen was interviewed at the police station, not as a suspect, not yet. The investigators didn't tell Stephen that they no longer thought Amy committed suicide. They asked him what he thought happened the night Amy died, and he said he didn't know, but it looked like she had shot herself. Detectives told Stephen that they found blood throughout the house that was visible with luminol, and someone had obviously tried to clean it up. Stephen, bewildered, said he had no idea how blood would have gotten throughout the house or who would have tried to clean it up. Investigators even floated some possible scenarios to Stephen. Did someone get injured in the house and try to clean it up? Or when you checked on Amy, did you walk in the blood and track it through the house or get any blood on yourself? Stephen said he just couldn't remember. He couldn't remember what he did when he and his son found his dead wife 2 days ago. It seems like
Huh.
all the details would stay with you, but Stephen is feeling pretty confident at this point,
I guess there's the argument that you could block the whole thing out, but if that's what Steven's going for, he's not doing a bang up job.
right?
Investigators thought it was suspicious that there wasn't more blood around the room where Amy died, and theorized that the murderer could have taken items out of the room that had blood on them and tried to dispose of them. The day Amy died had been a warm day, but officers had noticed a fire burning in the wood stove. Had someone started a fire to burn evidence? When asked about the wood stove burning on the day of the murder, Stevens said maybe Amy put wood in the stove when he left the house. The police had one more question before they released Stephen. Have you ever had an intimate relationship outside of your marriage? Stephen begrudgingly admitted that he had an affair a few years prior with a woman he met online named Michelle. No one, including Amy, knew about this dalliance. He couldn't remember specifics like when the affair began or ended. Stephen, thinking this would curry favor with the detectives, said that this was the only affair that he had had in almost 20 years of marriage.
I mean, give the guy a medal. He says he's only cheated this one time. I mean, it's almost like a hall pass.
Does it even count if it's only one affair?
Oh my God.
I'm sure this will come as a complete surprise, but Stephen lied during his police interview when he said he had only had one affair. Attorney Fink said they found evidence of at least two other affairs. Ironically, though, and we saw this with Nick Hackney too, at church, one of Stephen's duties was counseling married couples. In a prime example of not practicing what you preach, when Stephen wasn't busy with church duties or his IT job, he was searching for affair partners online. And he didn't just use any old website. He was a frequent user of Ashley Madison, which he learned about while playing marriage counselor. Their tagline at the time was, "Life is short, have an affair."
I mean, know your brand, I guess.
Corner that niche. Most people, unless you were actively looking to cheat on your spouse, hadn't heard of Ashley Madison until the data breach made mainstream news in July 2015 when hackers accessed sensitive information, including the dates of birth, email addresses, names, passwords, physical addresses, and sexual orientation of about 31 million users. The site purports to have had 37 million users at the time of the breach. Ashley Madison, attempting damage control, first denied that there had been a data breach. Hackers threatened to disclose the information they obtained if the site was not shut down. The site later admitted that a large amount of information had been released by the hackers. And if you think that was the death knell for this infidelity marketplace, you would be wrong. The company regrouped, put stronger security measures in place, changed their tagline to "Find Your Moment," and claims to currently have over 70 million users, which is something all right.
That's a huge amount of people. I can't quite get over that.
I know.
Stephen had met and had affairs with at least two women he met on the site. With one of the women, the affair lasted months. They met numerous times and even went on trips together. He also met women on Backpage.com, which shut down in 2018, where he paid for sex. Sergeant McAllister said the numerous affairs spoke to Stephen's character and possible motivations. And being classy AF, he continued trolling for women immediately following Amy's death.
Real nice.
The church, where Stephen was an elder, of course, did not believe in divorce. We believe that marriage is a covenant, not just between a man and a woman, but with God as well. Mm. Sergeant McAllister believed that Stephen chose murder instead of divorce as a way out of his marriage. He was well regarded within the church and did not want to lose his standing. The more women Stephen had affairs with, the less committed he was to his marriage. He wanted to find a way out, and with his job being IT and spending so much time on the internet, he decided to access the dark web and hire a hitman. We're going to do a quick rundown of the dark web. I'm sure most of you are like us and have heard of the dark web, but don't really know anything beyond that.
Too true.
Websites that most people use are considered open websites and are visible to your average computer user without the use of a special browser or software. You can find what you're looking for by using a search engine like Google or Chrome. Unlike the dark web, which is only accessible by users who have a Tor browser installed, most internet users will never need to access the dark web, so it is legal to do so. The dark web was created in 2000 with the release of Freenet, which was I love this, the thesis project of University of Edinburgh student Ian Clark, who wanted to create a distributed, decentralized information storage and retrieval system. Fancy.
Yeah.
Ian wanted to create a new way to anonymously communicate and share files online. That groundwork was the basis for the Tor project, which was released in 2002 and launched a browser in 2008. With the creation of Tor, users could now browse the internet completely anonymously and explore sites that were deemed part of the dark web.
The dark web's initial user was the U.S. Department of Defense, who used it to communicate anonymously and securely with users around the world, allowing secure communication for intelligence operatives and assets. They also used it to conduct surveillance and gather intelligence of potential threats and illegal activities, like weapons sales and drug trafficking, and to monitor potential cyber attacks. The dark web uses a technology called onion routing, which protects users from surveillance and tracking through a random path of encrypted servers. When users access a site through Tor, their information is routed through thousands of relay points that cover the user's tracks and make their browsing virtually impossible to trace. While using the dark web may seem highly suspect on the surface, it is legal, and there are many legitimate uses of Tor and anonymous browsing. For example, in countries where government surveillance may be used to spy on and oppress political dissidents, the dark web is often a place for communication that avoids government censorship and scrutiny. Despite these added layers of security, users should still be cautious and take proper security measures, such as periodically updating their security software and browsing with a strong VPN.
I mean, who knows? US citizens may find the dark web helpful in the not too distant future if they want to avoid government censorship or increased scrutiny.
It's true, fascism may be making a comeback, but did it ever really go away?
I think maybe it just wasn't so blatant.
Yeah, me too. But back to Shady Stephen, who sought and found a hitman site on the dark web called Besa Mafia, which claimed it could provide professionally trained Albanian contract killers for a price. Stephen communicated with Yura, who was the founder and administrator of the site. Stephen was excited to get the ball rolling and emailed Yura the following. They say that Besa means trust, so please do not break that. For reasons that are too personal and would give away my identity, I need this bitch dead. Stephen presented himself as a competitor of Amy's dog training business.
I mean, who knew dog training was such a cutthroat business?
For real. In another email, he said, "This bitch has torn my family apart by sleeping with my husband, who then left me and is stealing clients from my business." All in, and apparently having never heard the phrase, "no honor among thieves," Stephen gave specific instructions for the hitman. He wanted Amy's death to look like an accident. He said Amy had an upcoming trip to Moline, Illinois, and he wanted the hitman to hit Amy's car and make it look like a traffic accident. He provided detailed information regarding the hotel Amy would be staying at and the kind of car she would be driving. Yura, ever helpful, acknowledged the request and offered some advice. Being the criminal mastermind he was, he told Stephen to make sure he had an alibi. He needed to be around people on the planned date, buy something to have a receipt, and hopefully be caught on video surveillance, far, far away from where the hit would transpire.
Giddy. Stephen pawned some gold and silver bars for $6,000, and that's what he used to buy Bitcoin. And he sent the Bitcoin to Europe. Frustratingly for Stephen, Europe failed to do what he was paid for. Stephen sent an angry email complaining that the hit wasn't happening quickly enough. I just talked with her, which means it has not been done yet. Not good. Amy came home from her work trip alive and well. Weeks passed, and his wife of almost 20 years was still alive, really putting a dent in his extramarital activities. There was also a hefty $700,000 life insurance policy he was keen to cash in on. Stephen was growing more and more frustrated with Yura's inaction. Besa Mafia offered excuses and asked for more money. Stephen sent another email to Yura saying he now wanted Amy killed at her home and then wanted the house burned down. He came up with more money, another $6,000, to have his wife murdered. The Besa Mafia continually delayed the hit. It's weird. Apparently, Stephen had placed all his trust into a random site he found on the dark web, paid for a hit on his wife with cryptocurrency, and was flabbergasted that what he paid for was not getting done. And really, what are his options? It's not like he can go to law enforcement and say, I thought I hired a hitman to kill my wife, but he took my money and my wife is still here.
Yeah, where's my recourse?
Eventually, Stephen realized he had been duped and knew he was going to have to kill Amy himself. In early 2016, UK independent cybercrime researcher and white hat hacker Chris Montero was browsing various dark web message boards when he stumbled upon the Besa Mafia site, which promised to provide hitmen in exchange for Bitcoin. It offered visitors a menu of options ranging from maiming, lovely, to kidnapping to murder, and even a portal where users could apply to be hitmen. Besa Mafia's site was a little slicker than other assassination sites he had seen before, but just like the others, it was obviously a scam designed to rip off the cream of the crop of humanity. This may be an unpopular opinion, but I don't really feel an ounce of sympathy for these people that were scammed,
Me neither. It's better that it was a scam than a legit murder for hire site.
right?
Yeah. Chris wrote a searing post about the fraudulent hitman site and published it on his blog, pirate.london. Soon after the post went live, he received a furious message from Yura, who claimed to be Besa Mafia's administrator. He tried to bribe Chris to take down the post, but Chris refused. A few days later, Yura sent him a link to a YouTube video in which a hooded figure could be seen setting a car ablaze, holding up a sheet of paper saying that the act of vandalism was a dedication to pirate.london. Chris was intimidated. In his experience, this was more than typical scammer behavior. However, Chris kept probing the site. He exploited a vulnerability in their database, which contained extensive details about users who wanted to hire hitmen. Chris contacted the UK police and the FBI with the information. They were initially slow to respond, but FBI analysts did begin slogging through the huge amount of data. And I get it's tedious, but I kind of feel like it's worth their time to look into.
I think so too.
And it was because the FBI found Amy's name on the kill list. In February 2016, the FBI contacted the Allwines and the Cottage Grove police to tell them agents had shut down a phony murder for hire operation on the dark web called Besa Mafia. There is conflicting information about who shut down the site. Chris has said that he and an anonymous friend hacked into and shut down the site.
I tend to believe Chris.
Me too. Agents told Amy and Steven that someone with the username Dog Day God had transferred $12,000 in untraceable Bitcoin in an attempt to hire a hitman to kill Amy. She was frightened and confused. Who would want her dead? She had no enemies and lived a quiet, faithful life. FBI agents were certain this was not a case of mistaken identity. Dog Day God made it very clear who was to be killed. There were numerous emails between Dog Day God and Besa Mafia in which Dog Day God set out clearly where Amy would be and uploaded a photo of her so the hitman would know precisely who needed to be killed. At this point, the FBI did not suspect Steven. The police asked Amy to be diligent and call them if she noticed any suspicious activity. Steven agreed to install a surveillance system, including cameras and a Ring doorbell. He also bought a 9mm handgun. Amy was extremely stressed, but chose to tell very few people in her life about the threats. Thinking it would be a nice reprieve from her life at home, Amy and Steven traveled to Germany as representatives for their church. Amy was able to breathe easier and catch up on some of the sleep she had lost worrying about why she was being targeted. However, when the Allwines returned from their trip, Amy began receiving anonymous threatening emails.
Someone named Jane sent her a threatening email accusing her of having an affair with her husband. And because of Amy, her husband had left her and her life had become shit.
Love that it's just Amy's fault and her husband's in the clear.
Well, obviously.
Obviously.
There was also scarily specific information in the emails, like, I know where your gas meter is, and also listing a relative's address, and even mentioning her son, saying, I saw last Friday he was wearing a bright pink shirt, and I see you moved the RV. Ramping up the threats, the most intimidating email read, Amy, I still blame you for my life falling apart. I see that you have put up a security system now, and I have been informed by people on the internet that the police were snooping around my earlier emails. I have been assured that the emails are untraceable and they will not find me, that I cannot attack you directly with them watching. Instead, I will come after everything else that you love. Commit suicide. If you do not, then you will see things slowly taken away from you. And each time you will know that you could have stopped it, which will, it's just awful,
Yeah.
which will eat you apart from the inside. The sender then listed some options for Amy: shotgun to head, cyanide, inhaling gas, slitting wrist.
Lovely.
Yeah. As the threats against her mounted, Amy, searching for ways to keep her and her family safe, went through a local police program called Citizen Academy, which helps people understand how law enforcement works and gives them tools to protect themselves. Amy, unsurprisingly, gained confidence and excelled in the course. Unfortunately, all the knowledge and all the skills would not keep Amy safe when the real threat to her life slept next to her.
God, it's just tragic how she did everything she could to protect herself.
It really, really is. Detectives, having determined Amy's death was not a suicide, began to delve deeper into the lives of Amy and Stephen. They looked through Amy's emails, phone, computer, and social media and found zero evidence that she had ever had an affair. Who was this Jane and why was Amy being targeted? Detectives concluded that Jane and Dog Day God were the same person. Investigators finally began to look a little closer at mild mannered Stephen.
It's not always the husband, obviously, but shouldn't they have attempted to rule him out earlier, especially given the references to an affair? Motive, anyone?
Yeah, I completely agree. They seized over 60 pieces of electronics, including multiple phones, computers, hard drives, servers, and thumb drives. Investigators started to unravel Stephen's nefarious activities.
Computer forensic expert Mark Lanterman discovered a trail of digital breadcrumbs on Stephen's electronic devices that were a mirror image of the transactions of the anonymous Dog Day God. On Valentine's Day 2016, when Dog Day God contacted Besa Mafia, Stephen was at home on his MacBook Pro looking up Bitcoin. The next day, Stephen looked up Amy's itinerary for her upcoming dog training convention in Moline, Illinois. 2 minutes after looking up the itinerary, Dog Day God emailed Besa Mafia. The target will be traveling out of town to Moline, about a 3 hour drive from Chicago. What is the price in Bitcoin for a hit, and ideally making it look like an accident? On March 6th, Dog Day God sent a picture of Amy from a family vacation in Hawaii to Besa Mafia, mere seconds after Stephen downloaded the same picture from their home server. Stephen purchased 15.5 Bitcoin, worth a little more than $6,000. For context, because it fluctuates constantly, on the date we are writing this, that would be worth $1,736,000.
Holy shit,
Jesus, that's a hell of a spike in less than a decade.
it sure is.
Bitcoin has a unique 34-character alphanumeric code known as a Bitcoin wallet. On March 22nd, Stephen copied the code to the Notes app on his iPhone 5. 23 seconds later, Dog Day God sent the same code to Besa Mafia. 40 seconds after that, the note was deleted from Stephen's phone. But is anything ever really deleted? I don't know. Maybe an IT specialist would know. Or maybe not, because the deleted note was copied to the cloud and backed up to Stephen's new iPhone 6 on May 27th. On August 3rd, Stephen's iPhone 6 was backed up on his MacBook Pro, including the deleted Bitcoin wallet. Mark said, "It's my understanding Mr. Allwine is an IT guy by profession, and we have egos, and I think Mr. Allwine thought he was smarter than everyone else. And fortunately for justice, that wasn't true." And the evidence kept coming. Sergeant McAllister discovered that the username, Dog Day God, opened an account in May on another dark website, Dream Market, to inquire about buying scopolamine with Bitcoin. Scopolamine is a prescription drug that is commonly used to treat motion sickness and nausea following surgery. It's also nicknamed the devil's drug. It can cause a person to experience blurred vision, a dry mouth and throat, confusion, hallucinations, drowsiness, and in heavy doses, the drug can make people disoriented and extremely compliant. The autopsy revealed Amy had been given 20 times the therapeutic dose of scopolamine. Amy did not have a prescription for this so called devil's drug.
Detectives believe that Stephen put the large dosage in Amy's lunch the day of her murder, and this explains the symptoms Amy was suffering that day. Detectives theorize that Stephen was hoping this large quantity would kill Amy. They also believed because it is such an obscure and not often tested drug, Stephen may have gotten away with murder if things had gone according to plan. When the drug did not work, Stephen shot Amy in the head instead, staging the scene as a suicide and, this just kills me, allowing his son to find the body of his mother.
Mhm.
The medical examiner concluded that Amy died at around 3 p.m. Stephen initially told police he last saw Amy around 5:30 p.m. that night when he left to go pick up their son from her parents' house. When they arrived home later that night, they found Amy lying in the bedroom. Video recording from the couple's home security system confirmed Stephen left the residence around 5:30 and that no one entered the house through the three monitored entry points until he and his son returned home to find Amy's body. Investigators later learned from one of Stephen's employers, Opantix, that he did not log any activity after taking his lunch break at 12:13 p.m. on the day of the murder. Stephen's other employer, Cigna, also verified that he did not log into work at all on November 13th. So Stephen was not in his basement office working, but upstairs murdering his wife, staging the scene, and doing a bad cleanup job.
And a bad frame up job, too.
True. Stephen was arrested on January 31st, 2017, and charged with second-degree murder. Detectives waited until Stephen dropped Joe off at school and then conducted a traffic stop and arrested him. Stephen paid his bail and returned home. However, a few days later, he broke a condition of his bail when he tried to contact his young son via text. He was again arrested and the bail was increased. Stephen paid the bond and was released, but was required to wear a GPS monitoring device. 2 months later, he was back behind bars with the increased charge of first-degree premeditated murder after the grand jury's indictment. He remained in jail until his trial.
Which, in my opinion, is where he should have been the entire time.
I agree.
Kevin DeVore, Stephen's attorney, was fairly confident heading into trial. To counter the mountain of evidence against his client, he said there was evidence that Stephen's computer had been hacked, though that never materialized. Attorney DeVore argued that there was no physical evidence that Stephen was the one who typed the Bitcoin code into his iPhone. He said all of the evidence was through computer records, and a forensic scientist hired by the defense intimated that anyone could have typed the Bitcoin code into Stephen's phone. Attorney DeVore argued that Stephen could not have murdered Amy because he wasn't home at the time Amy was murdered, which contradicts the time of death and the video surveillance showing he was home until around 5:30 p.m. Several witnesses testified to either seeing Amy sometime in the afternoon in her driveway or to hearing an anonymous vehicle speed off from the Allwine residence. Attorney DeVore acknowledged that Stephen did have romantic relationships with other women, but, and I feel like we have heard this from numerous defense attorneys, just because he had these affairs didn't mean he killed his wife.
Which is true. Many people cheat and don't kill their wives. They're just shit humans.
But as we've all seen, it can also be a motive for murder. He said Stephen loved his wife. Stephen did not take the stand in his own defense during the trial. Jurors didn't buy into the defense's fantasy, and on January 31st, 2018, after 6 days of trial and 8 hours of deliberations, a jury of 6 men and 6 women found Stephen guilty of premeditated first-degree murder. Amy's family described the terrifying final months of her life in their victim impact statements. Julie Brown, Amy's sister, said the FBI warned that the threats should be taken seriously. She said tasks like grocery shopping spurred intense anxiety for Amy and that her sister lived in fear every waking moment of the last months of her life. In a written statement, Amy's parents, Chuck and Joanne Zutz, said the betrayal they felt as authorities investigated Stephen amplified their grief. Stephen, being an absolute piece of garbage, actually lived in the Zutz's home for 2 months after murdering their daughter. The Zutzes went on to say that their daughter's murder robbed her son of his mother and terminated their ability to enjoy cherished family traditions.
Amy's sister went on to say that throughout their grief, they found strength in their faith, and even though they had lost so much, with God's grace, all is not lost. Other friends and family described Amy as a loving mother, a compassionate friend, and a celebrated dog trainer in their close-knit community. Another friend said that Amy believed in people and helped them believe in themselves. And the most gut wrenching statement was written by Joseph, who was 9 when Amy was murdered, and was read by Julie. My mom was a good mom. I will always love her and remember her. With no shame, Stephen stared down at the table in front of him during the statements.
Poor Joseph.
Right, yeah. Before his sentencing, Stephen addressed the court for the first time. He showed no remorse for his actions and said he loved his wife and the person that killed her was still out there. Just like Sam Shepard, who said a bushy haired man bludgeoned his pregnant wife Marilyn to death, or Alex Murdoch, who refused to confess that he shot his wife Maggie and son Paul, Stephen went on to say, I never went to sleep and I never woke up without kissing her. The grief of losing her is tremendous. No one ever talked bad about our relationship. And he said they never even argued.
I'm sorry. If a couple claims to never argue, I'm immediately giving them the side eye.
Yeah, I don't think that this was their situation, but it makes me think that one of them is controlling and the other partner is afraid to speak when you say that they never argue.
100%.
Stephen insinuated that the unknown killer had entered the house through an unlocked patio door. He went on to say that I saw her with her eyes wide open and no light behind her eyes. As he rambled on for about 8 minutes, he sometimes paused awkwardly, and people in the courtroom either gasped at the words he spoke or openly wept. Even though she's gone knowing I loved her. The only image I have in my mind is one of my smiling, beautiful wife. Stephen went on to say that while awaiting his trial, he had met drug addicts, child molesters, and kidnappers, and he had been conducting Bible study. I'm going to take my Bible to St. Cloud Prison and see what happens.
Hopefully someone hits him with it. Kidding. Not condoning violence.
Maybe knock some decency into him. He ended with, I've never asked for anything except to work for God. Judge B. William Elkstrom, clearly annoyed, did not buy what Stephen was shoveling. You are an incredible actor, a hypocrite, and a cold and calculating killer. As he sentenced Stephen to life in prison without parole on February 2nd, 2018.
Attorney Fink said the jury reached the right conclusion and that the uncaring execution of Amy Allwine was incomprehensible. Washington County Assistant Attorney Jamie Lynn Cruiser further echoed these sentiments. At the end of the day, justice was served, and I'm glad for Amy and her family. In 2021, 5 years after killing his wife, Stephen fittingly talked to Fox 9 investigators in the chapel of Stillwater Prison, where he is serving his life sentence. He claimed he was the victim of high-tech framing. When you look at all the scientific evidence, when you look at the hard physical evidence, I couldn't have done it. If you knew me as an individual, I couldn't have done it. Stephen was unable to offer any evidence proving his innocence, but rather tried to cast doubt on the evidence found on some of the more than 60 electronic devices taken from his home. Stephen, wait for it, claimed the real killer planted evidence on his electronics to implicate him in the murder. He suggested that there was physical evidence at the crime scene that could have exonerated him, but that it was ignored. He didn't mention what this physical evidence was. When asked about the Bitcoin wallet, Stephen said, my supposition, I don't have evidence to back this up, is that somebody else got it posted to the cloud, and then the cloud syncs with my MacBook and brought it there. When he was asked how this was possible, he said he was hacked. Acting like an employee of the Geek Squad, he said, one of the things I always tell people is to update your passwords. And unfortunately, I didn't follow my own advice. When asked about his use of Ashley Madison and his numerous affairs, Stephen refused to answer any questions.
Of course he did.
What, someone didn't create a fake profile in his name to frame him that way too? He also floated the idea that maybe someone on the dark web had confused his wife with another Amy.
That makes zero sense.
And all the information provided about her just ended up there by mistake? He also said that based on the evidence that he apparently had now reviewed, He thinks he knows who killed Amy and he could trace it back to someone she was working with. Finally, Stephen said, "For justice to really be done in this situation, you need to bring the person to justice who was responsible." Which we did, Stephen. Spoiler, it was you.
Exactly. Stephen appealed the first degree murder conviction, arguing prosecutorial misconduct and an inadequate defense. The Minnesota Supreme Court rejected those claims and affirmed his conviction. Stephen said he filed a brief with the U.S. Supreme Court, but we could find no record of that. Stephen remains in prison, still professing his innocence. He vowed to continue preaching the word of God in prison and held out hope that someday the real killer will be found. Stephen bemoaned the fact that he hadn't testified. Maybe I should have to explain certain things. And also, he acknowledged that the prosecution did a better job persuading the jury than did his defense attorney, Kevin DeBoer. And I'm thinking being a defense attorney would be a horrific job just in its own, but it's a rather thankless job where the people you choose to defend, they blame you instead of the evidence against them.
Yeah, but maybe you have to go into trial knowing that's a possibility because it's not like that's an infrequent occurrence.
That's true. Mark, the computer forensics expert who analyzed the electronic devices for the prosecution, said the evidence was overwhelming. I would say this is probably the most compelling case I have ever worked on in the last 30 years. He went on to say that he thought Stephen was arrogant. He did it. He's having a hard time accepting that responsibility. He's a coward. And we're going to circle back to Mr. Mark in a minute.
Oh, Mr. Mark.
In April of 2022, five men with ties to Besa Mafia were arrested in Romania. We couldn't find the status of the case or if a trial was ever held. Unfortunately, Besa Mafia was not the only Hitman site on the dark web, so if someone with ill intent was to search for a hitman, they would likely find someone willing to kill for a cryptocurrency payment. However, the actuality that it is just a scam is pretty high. On to some more troubling news. Stephen, along with another convicted killer in Minnesota, are citing credibility concerns in petitions for new trials. Mark Lanterman has come under fire for being less than truthful regarding his education and credentials. He has said that he graduated from college that went bankrupt and closed years ago. In a deposition, he said he had requested transcripts and hadn't been able to acquire them. And not sure how he requested them from the school if the school is no more. Anyway, he has also been unable to provide documentation regarding specific credentials he says he has earned. Hennepin County, where Minneapolis is located, has terminated Mark's lucrative contract.
Also, Washington County, where Cottage Grove is located, stopped contracting with Mark in 2018. This, of course, raises questions about the vetting process for contracting with experts in various counties. And most concerningly, this opens the window for convicted criminals to question evidence and experts who testified under oath regarding its validity. Stephen was one of about a dozen convicted individuals who received letters alerting them of Mark's potential misrepresentations. Stephen, not wanting to miss an opportunity to profess his innocence, posed the question: how many times has Lanterman lied under oath, whether at trial, in a deposition, or in an affidavit that are all sworn under penalty of perjury? Thankfully, there are currently no specific allegations that Mark ever lied about the facts of a case. But depending on how critical a role he played, this could still open the door for a new trial. Jennifer McAward, associate professor at the Notre Dame Law School, who has studied credibility issues around witnesses, said, "This is newly discovered evidence that might call into question a person's conviction. I would hope they're going back and looking at all of the cases in which he testified and trying to assess whether they can continue to defend those convictions." Stephen is serving out his sentence at Minnesota Correctional Facility Stillwater. He continues to tell anyone who will listen that he has been framed and is innocent. He had a flawed defense and doesn't understand why his various appeals have been denied. He has done several interviews, written a considerable number of blog posts regarding his favorite subject, himself, and invites interested persons to write to him on JPay, which allows inmates to send and receive emails and, of course, receive money.
Oh, that just makes me chuckle. Sorry.
I know.
What are your thoughts about computer forensic expert Mark Lanterman's shaky credentials and the validity of his testimony?
I think it's a real fucking shame that his likely lies about his credentials could result in an unsafe conviction and the possibility of Amy's family being re traumatized in a retrial. But if they do, I'll keep everything crossed that a more truthful expert will testify to the facts, which are that Stephen slash Dog Day God paid for a hitman and bought the devil's drug to kill his wife. Ideally, though, the prosecution's case was solid enough without Mark's testimony that Stephen doesn't get another shot at freedom.
Yeah, I agree. I think the prosecution's case and the evidence is solid. So I too will cross everything that there is not a retrial and Stephen can continue to tell whoever will listen that he is innocent when he knows the truth.
As I'm sure he'll do.
Next week, we'll be continuing our series on religious leaders who kill family members when we discuss the case of Christopher Gaddis.
All the sources we used for this episode are in the show notes below. If you'd like to suggest a case or a theme for us to discuss, feel free to email us at terrifyingtypicalpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us at terrifyingtypicalpodcast on Instagram and at terrifyinglytypicalpod on TikTok. Leave us a comment below to let us know what you thought of the case. We'd love to hear your opinions.
See you next week.